Imagine waking up, fully conscious, trapped inside a glass tube. Like you can't move a single muscle, you can't scream, and worst of all, you can't actually wake up.
Yeah, that is a truly terrifying concept. And in the reality of deep space travel, at least as it's outlined in the source text we are examining today, this phenomenon is called mental malaria.
Mental malaria, that just sounds awful.
Right. I mean, the engineers who designed these multi-billion-dollar hypersleep chambers, they basically perfected the physical side of things. They figured out the exact chemical cocktails to, prevent your cells from crystallizing.
Your body is totally fine.
Exactly. They know how to halt your circulation, drop your core temperature, but they hit a massive wall when it came to the brain.
Because you can't just turn the brain off completely.
Exactly. To prevent total neural death, they have to leave this tiny spark of synaptic activity running, and that means you dream.
Wow. Okay. And since your biological clock is essentially frozen, I'm guessing those dreams don't just feel like a normal 8 hours.
Not at all. A single nightmare can stretch on for a year. Or 2, or 5. You're just trapped in this unending state of terror.
And the machines, like the very machines monitoring your life signs, they just refuse to let you wake up because, well, it's not time yet.
Yeah, it is the ultimate form of technological imprisonment. I mean, we surrender our volition entirely to these automated systems. We trust that their embedded programming has accounted for every possible variable.
But as we see in the Alien³ novelization text, that trust is, well, it's highly misplaced.
Very much so. The text presents this brutal deconstruction of what happens when infallible technology and rigid bureaucracy encounter an unpredictable biological variable. The machines just do not care about your nightmares.
Right, they only care about their parameters.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the core mission of our deep dive today.
We're looking at a narrative that takes us from a technological betrayal aboard a state-of-the-art spaceship down to a crash landing on a forgotten, freezing prison planet.
And it all builds to this terrifying realization that the most dangerous monsters might not be the alien predators at all. The true threat comes from the human institutions that try to control them.
It really is a fascinating exploration of systemic failure.
It really is. So to you listening, as we get into this, I want you to think about the foolproof systems in your own life, like at your job, in your tech, and just ask yourself, what happens when those systems encounter something they weren't programmed to understand?
To explore that, we really have to start on the Sulaco. This is a massive, heavily automated military transport ship. It's speeding through the void on a pre-programmed course back to Earth.
And who is actually on board?
There are 4 survivors in cryogenic sleep. You've got Ripley, an injured Marine named Hicks, a badly damaged android named Bishop, and a young girl, Newt.
So very fragile group.
Very. And the ship's computer is operating flawlessly. It's totally devoid of any emotion, just regulating the atmosphere and monitoring vitals.
But the text introduces a 5th passenger, right? Something that disrupts this pristine mechanical environment.
Yes, a facehugger. It's this biological entity described as resembling a horseshoe crab with articulated legs and a flexible tail.
Made of a highly carbon-rich chitin, I believe the text says.
Right. Now, if you know the lore, you know what this creature does. But what's fascinating is how the text actually describes it here.
Yeah, let's focus on that. Because the alien is framed as being just as mechanical as the computers guiding the Sulaco.
Exactly. It doesn't hunt for pleasure. It has absolutely no interest in food or territory.
It's just driven by this singular, relentlessly embedded biological imperative. Procreation.
It's an organic machine, and its target is Newt's cryogenic tube.
Which is terrifying because she's just a child and she's completely defenseless.
Completely. The creature begins to exert this inconceivable physical strength to pry open the transparent metallic glass of her sleep cylinder.
Now, that metallic glass is supposed to be incredibly resilient.
Right, it is, but the alien actually manages to crack the seal.
And this triggers just a masterclass in catastrophic cascading failure. Because a sliver of that sharp metallic glass breaks off under the pressure.
And it slices right into the alien's body.
Yes. And the creature's blood, which we know is a highly concentrated corrosive acid, just starts pumping out.
And we should probably talk about the mechanics of this acid. It's not just like a normal chemical burn.
No, it acts almost like a rapid molecular solvent. It eats through the metallic glass of the adjacent cylinder. It eats through the hardened metal base of the cryodeck itself.
And it burns straight down into the subflooring of the ship.
Which is packed with electrical conduits and accumulated explosive gases. So naturally, the acid triggers an electrical fire.
Now, consider how a human operator would react to a fire on a cryogenic deck. A human would, assess the threat, they'd realize there are sleeping passengers, and immediately look for the source.
But the infallible AI of the Sulaco does literally none of that.
It responds with absolute chilling calm. A serene, artificial female voice announces the presence of explosive gases.
Flush-mounted fans activate to inhale the smoke, but the acid has already compromised the wiring.
Right. An automated fire nozzle drops from the ceiling to spray suppressant, but the system is fried. The nozzle just dies.
And the ship's voice simply states, fire suppression system inactivated. Like, no alarm, no context, no panic.
Because the machine makes no value judgments. The computer observes the fire, calculates that the cryogenic compartment is no longer a viable environment for the sleepers, and simply executes the next line of its programming.
The evacuation protocol.
Exactly. It mechanically loads the sleeping humans into an emergency escape vehicle, an EEV, and just ejects them into the void.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. I always hear people compare this to putting a self-driving car on autopilot while a wasp is loose in the cabin.
Right, that's a common analogy.
But I honestly think that misses the point. It's more like an autoimmune disease.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it. How so?
Well, think about how the human body reacts to a severe infection. Sometimes, the immune system's blind, aggressive response to a localized threat ends up causing systemic shock.
Ah, I see. And that shock kills the patient faster than the actual bacteria would have.
Exactly. The Sulaco's AI is that autoimmune response. In its blind effort to, quote-unquote, cure the fire, it violently ejects the host bodies into a far worse situation.
Because the ejection damages the EEV. It scrambles its navigation systems and forces it to blindly lock onto the nearest active beacon.
Right. The ship didn't save them, it just outsourced their destruction.
That's a much more accurate framework. The AI lacks the contextual awareness to recognize why the fire started.
Or to detect the alien organism that is now trapped inside the EEV with them.
Right. The technological failsafe essentially acts as a delivery system. It transports the survivors and the apex predator directly to Fiorina 361.
Also known as Fury 161, which is basically society at the absolute end of the universe.
It really is. Fiorina 361 is an outer veil mineral ore refinery, and it's also a maximum security correctional facility.
And the environment alone is hostile enough to kill you. I mean, the sky is a roiling coal dust gray.
The landscape is just scoured black stone, pummeled by freezing rain and howling winds.
And then, they're the lice.
Oh, right. The biting carnivorous arthropods.
Yeah, they force everyone on the planet to shave their heads entirely just to avoid being eaten alive.
But honestly, the environment is secondary to the human element here. The population consists of 25 male inmates.
And the text points out that they all possess a specific genetic marker. It's referred to in this universe as the double Y chromosome.
Yes. Let's unpack that, because it's not just a throwaway sci-fi term.
No, it taps into a real, it entirely debunked mid-20th century criminological theory.
The idea that an extra Y chromosome creates hyper-aggressive, violent tendencies.
Exactly. And to be clear to you listening, we're just reporting on what the source material states about this universe. We're not endorsing this theory.
Right. In the universe of Weyland-Yutani, the corporation has apparently weaponized this genetic determinism.
They use it to predetermine criminality, essentially institutionalizing eugenics to create a pipeline of disposable slave labor penal colonies.
It's incredibly bleak. These men, murderers, rapists, thieves were dumped here just to mine lead.
And when the ore ran dry, Weyland-Yutani simply abandoned the facility. It wasn't economically viable to transport them back.
So a handful of inmates opted to stay behind as a custodial staff. They're watched over by a single bureaucratic superintendent named Andrews,
along with his sycophantic assistant, Aaron, and a medical officer, Clemens.
Left to their own devices in this dark, freezing pressure cooker, the inmates form their own society.
Led by a massive prisoner named Dylan.
Yes. Yeah. They adopted a fundamentalist, apocalyptic Christian religion. Dylan preaches constantly about being poor sinners in the hands of an angry God, just waiting for redemption.
Now, a lot of analyses frame this religion as a stabilizing stasis. But I'd actually push back on that a bit.
Oh, why is that?
Well, stasis implies a natural resting state. What Dylan and Andrews are doing is active, exhausting suppression.
That makes sense.
Like to you listening, imagine working a job you hate, where you can never leave, the environment is physically painful, and your employer has literally forgotten you exist.
The only way you don't lose your mind is by building an incredibly rigid routine.
Exactly. Andrews is terrified of anything that might disrupt this established order. He refuses to keep weapons on site. No pulse rifles, Nothing.
Because he believes the illusion of order is their only defense against total barbarism.
Right. It's an active suppression of chaos.
Which makes the society incredibly brittle. Andrews relies on the monotony of daily tasks like smelting lead and making wax candles to act as a narcotic for the inmates.
And when you build a social structure that cannot bend, it will inevitably shatter the moment an unpredictable variable is introduced.
And Ripley is that variable.
Oh, absolutely. When the EEV violently crashes into the freezing ocean of Fiorina, the medical officer, Clemens, pulls her from the wreckage.
Instantly, she's processed into this bleak reality. She's taken to the bug wash, which is a hot chemical shower.
And her head is shaved to stave off the lice. This is a visceral stripping away of her identity.
She is physically marked by the brutal logic of Fiorina before she even fully regains consciousness.
The physical trauma is severe, but honestly, it pales in comparison to the psychological burden she wakes up to.
Yeah, when she comes in the infirmary, Clemens delivers the autopsy of her entire previous life.
He tells her Corporal Hicks was impaled and crushed during the crash.
The android bishop was smashed beyond repair.
And Newt, the child Ripley, had literally gone through hell to save drowned inside her cryotube when the EEV flooded.
It's just devastating. But the text highlights a terrifying psychological phenomenon here. Ripley doesn't break down into hysterics.
No, her grief is immediately hijacked by the lingering dread of the mental malaria she suffered on the Sulaco.
She suspects the alien was on the ship. She demands to see Newt's body.
Yeah.
And she doesn't just want to see it. She insists on a full-scale autopsy.
This is where we really see Ripley weaponizing the bureaucracy against itself.
What do you mean by that?
Well, she knows she cannot afford the luxury of mourning. She has to know if an alien embryo was implanted in the child. But she also understands the architecture of authority.
Right. If she tells Superintendent Andrews, man whose entire worldview relies on predictable, mundane order, that an 8-foot-tall, acid-bleeding space monster caused the crash.
He'll label her clinically insane. He'll lock her in a padded cell, and the threat will be ignored until it kills them all.
So she lies. And the specific lie she chooses is brilliant.
She tells Clemens she suspects a mutated cholera outbreak, a biological weapon from a previous mission.
Now, why cholera specifically?
Because cholera is waterborne. It has a rapid onset, and it causes catastrophic internal fluid buildup, which perfectly aligns with a death by drowning in a crashed escape pod.
That is so smart. She uses the language of virology, a threat the institution can comprehend and fears deeply, to bypass their skepticism of the supernatural.
Exactly. She forces Clemens to take a bone saw and crack open a child's ribcage based entirely on a fabricated medical pretext.
The ethical philosophy of that moment is just staggering. I mean, she violates the bodily autonomy of a dead child, traumatizing herself and the doctor to protect a society that doesn't even want her there.
It's incredibly heavy. When Clemens declares the lungs clear, flooded only with seawater, the relief is profound.
But Ripley's paranoia, her deep-seated understanding of this organism's resilience, drives her to demand the bodies be cremated immediately in the facility's massive lead works.
And the novelization gives us this incredibly cinematic juxtaposition during the cremation.
Yeah, up on the catwalk over the smelting pit, Dylan is delivering this moving, profound eulogy.
He talks about how within each seed there is the promise of a flower, trying to find some theological meaning in the meaningless deaths of Newt and Hicks.
But the text cuts away from his speech down into the forgotten dark depths of the facility's abattoir,
Where a literal new life is being born.
the inmates had hauled in a dead ox earlier for food. As Dylan preaches about the promise of a flower, the dead ox begins to twitch in its chains.
It's so gross. Its belly swells unnaturally, acting as an organic pressure cooker until it violently bursts open.
The alien emerges, taking its first steps, and immediately vanishes into the shadows of the air ducts.
So the humans are standing around a fire, burning their dead, absolutely convinced they are incinerating the threat.
They think the danger is contained.
Meanwhile, the actual threat has already bypassed their perimeter. It's breathing, it's learning the layout, and it's operating perfectly within their blind spots.
Which brings us to the hunt. The alien is an apex predator, and it begins to test the environment.
It starts with an inmate named Murphy, who is assigned to clean a massive, high-speed ventilation fan blade.
Murphy finds a piece of shed skin in the ductwork. It looks like metallic foil.
But he assumes it's just a dead local animal, a piece of debris. He applies a mundane explanation to a terrifying anomaly.
But the anomaly spits back. The alien is hiding in the recess. It doesn't just bite him, it weaponizes its own biology.
spitting a concentrated stream of acidic fluid directly into Murphy's face.
Ah!
The physical description is brutal.
His flesh begins to melt instantly. Blinded, screaming in unendurable pain, Murphy loses his spatial awareness.
And he stumbles backward directly into the massive fan blades. He is shredded.
It's awful, but the reaction of the prison leadership to this event perfectly illustrates a psychological concept known as normalcy bias.
Right. When people are confronted with a disaster that fundamentally breaks their understanding of the world, their brains will often invent a rational, normal explanation to avoid processing the trauma.
Exactly. Superintendent Andrews looks at a man pureed by a fan and concludes it was a stupid, tragic accident.
He assumes Murphy just slipped.
The alternative, that there is an invisible monster hunting them, would shatter his precious established order, so his brain simply refuses to see it.
Andrews is putting the threat in a neat little box, but the threat refuses to stay there.
The alien moves down into the subterranean tunnels. 3 inmates, Boggs, Rains, and a deeply unstable man named Golic, are sent down to scavenge.
And they're relying on primitive wax candles. Let's talk about the sensory deprivation of this scene.
It's intense. Deep underground, no natural light, dead silence.
Suddenly, the candles start going out behind them, one by one. There's no downdraft. The darkness is just closing in.
It builds an atmosphere of absolute dread. Rains turns back to relight a candle, and out of the blackness, something fast and incredibly heavy drops on him.
The text describes the alien as having shards of reflection like chrome glass inlaid in adamantine black metal.
Rains lets out a scream that fades into a high-pitched whistle as the creature takes him.
Boggs and Golic panic. They run, but the tunnels are a maze. They stumble back upon Rain's mutilated body.
And as Boggs is vomiting from the sheer horror of it, Golic looks up.
The alien is hanging from the ceiling like a gargoyle. It reaches down, wraps its cable-like fingers around Boggs' head, and with a single sickening twist, rips his head clean off his shoulders.
The alien then drops the head, turns, and locks eyes with Golic.
But it doesn't kill him.
No, it just lets him witness the impossible. Golic's already fragile mind shatters completely. He runs back to the main facility covered in blood, raving about a dragon that feeds on human flesh.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We have to look at the Cassandra complex here.
Right, from Greek mythology, Cassandra is cursed to know the absolute truth of the future, but doomed to never be believed by anyone.
Golic is the Cassandra of Fiorina 361. He has seen the undeniable reality of the predator.
But how does Andrews react? He looks at Golic's criminal record. He looks at his history of violent instability.
And he applies that normalcy bias again. He decides Golic simply snapped and murdered his friends.
The bureaucracy acts as a camouflage for the alien.
That's such a great point. The creature doesn't need to hide from the authorities because the authorities are actively hiding the creature from themselves.
The institution's prejudice against the inmates creates the perfect cover for an apex predator.
If you're a fan of the source material, you know the monster is scary. But the truly terrifying part is realizing that human HR policies are basically what enable the monster to thrive.
It's so true. Ripley is the only one unburdened by this institutional blindness. She knows she needs hard data, and she knows the living won't provide it.
So she ventures out into the freezing, toxic trash dump to find the remains of the android, Bishop.
Which is an insane risk. She is nearly assaulted by a group of inmates in the dump.
It's only because Dylan intervenes, violently enforcing his own brand of brutal justice, that she survives.
She drags Bishop's crushed head and torso back to the EEV, splices his optic cables, and brings him back online just long enough to interface with the flight recorder.
And Bishop, functioning at a severely diminished capacity, confirms the nightmare.
He accesses the logs and verifies that the alien was on the Sulaco, caused the fire, and hitched a ride on the EEV.
But more importantly, he confirms that Weyland-Yutani knows.
Right. The ship transmitted the data. The corporation is fully aware of what is on Fiorina 361.
And then we get this deeply philosophical exchange. Bishop, an artificial person, begs Ripley to permanently disconnect him.
He tells her he would rather be nothing than exist as a desiccated reality, an intact memory trapped in limbo.
He recognizes that existence without purpose or agency is its own kind of hell.
Ripley grants his wish, unplugs him, and takes this irrefutable truth straight to Superintendent Andrews.
And Andrews' response is the absolute pinnacle of bureaucratic hubris.
Ripley lays out the biology of the xenomorph. She details its life cycle, its acid blood, its sheer lethality.
Andrews listens and then flatly dismisses her. He refuses to pivot.
He points out that they lack weapons, therefore acknowledging a monster would serve no practical purpose other than inciting panic.
He confines her to the infirmary, stating, "I am in charge here, and I am exercising my discretion."
That phrase, exercising my discretion, is the verbal equivalent of closing your eyes right before a car crash.
It really is. He believes his title grants him immunity from reality. And speaking of the arrogance of expertise, this brings us to the tragedy of Clemens.
Yes, while Ripley is confined, Clemens finally explains how a brilliant physician ended up on a forgotten penal colony.
We need to explain the neurochemistry at play here, right?
Right. Clemens was addicted to a synthetic drug called metafine. In this universe, metafine isn't just a recreational high. It's a pharmacological tool pushed to enhance productivity.
It blocks fatigue receptors and artificially inflates the ego center of the brain,
It gives the user a profound sense of invincibility and flawless judgment.
which is exactly what causes his downfall. Clemens was working a 36-hour triage shift after a massive fuel station explosion.
He was flooded with metafine. He felt like a god.
And because of that chemically induced arrogance, he didn't double-check a simple dosage chart.
He prescribed the wrong painkillers, and 11 people died from an administrative error born of sheer overconfidence.
He lost everything and exiled himself to Fiorina.
Clemens's backstory is the thematic core of the entire text. It is the danger of assuming your systems, whether it's your own chemically altered brain, the Sulaco's automated failsafes, or Andrews's PRISM protocols, are infallible.
The moment you believe you have mastered all variables, the universe introduces a new one.
And the universe corrects Clemens in the most brutal way imaginable.
Think about the timing. Clemens is sitting on the edge of the bed. He is finally vulnerable.
He is opening his soul to Ripley, experiencing a moment of genuine human connection.
And silently, without a single sound, the alien drops from the ventilation shaft above him.
Before Clemens can even register the shadow, the alien strikes, tearing his head off. The illusion of safety is shattered in a fraction of a second.
But then the creature exhibits a behavior that defies its established programming.
It throws Clemens's body aside. It corners Ripley against the wall. It leans in, its inner jaw extending.
And then it stops.
It sniffs her, almost curiously, and then violently retreats back into the ceiling, leaving her completely unharmed.
Ripley is left hyperventilating, covered in Clemens's blood, trying to understand why she is still alive.
Meanwhile, what is the great Superintendent Andrews doing?
He's in the mess hall, giving a pompous rumor control speech to the inmates.
He is standing under a massive ventilation shaft, projecting his authority, telling the men that there is no monster.
That the established order will protect them, and that he will not tolerate any nonsense.
The irony is suffocating. He is literally preaching the gospel of bureaucracy when the alien drops.
It snatches him by the shoulders and violently pulls his entire body up into the dark ductwork.
It happens so fast that the inmates barely register it. 1 second he is dictating policy, the next he is gone.
The man who held the keys, the man who defined reality for the colony, is just erased.
And with him, the entire brittle structure of the prison collapses. The inmates are thrown into total panic.
They have no weapons, no leadership, and no plan. It falls to Ripley, Dylan, and the terrified assistant, Aaron, to devise a counterattack.
Ripley shifts from survivor to tactician. She analyzes the architecture of the facility.
She locates a massive, hermetically sealed, toxic waste disposal chamber.
The door to this chamber is made of 6-foot-thick ceramo carbide steel, engineered to hold a perfect vacuum and dissipate industrial lasers. It is an immovable object.
So she devises a trap. They're going to use a highly volatile chemical solvent called quinitricylene, or QTC.
Let's talk about the thermodynamics of QTC. It's not just flammable.
Wait, so it literally eats oxygen?
Yes, it acts as an aggressive chemical accelerant that violently consumes oxygen in confined spaces.
Wow. So they paint the corridors and air shafts with it.
The plan is to ignite the QTC, creating a wall of fire that will drive the alien down a specific path, like a rat in a maze, straight into the waste chamber.
It is a brilliant theoretical plan, but it relies on humans.
And humans, especially terrified, untrained prisoners, make mistakes.
As they are taking their positions, an inmate stationed near a ventilation shaft panics and drops his ignition flare prematurely.
The QTC ignites instantly. The thermodynamics take over.
The fire flashes through the corridors much faster than anticipated, cutting off escape routes. It's a massacre.
The alien, flushed out early, drops into the chaos, attacking blindly. Inmates are caught in the blast, burning alive.
Amidst this inferno, an inmate named Junior, whose friend was just killed, makes a split-second decision.
He acts as human bait. He sprints directly into the toxic waste chamber, screaming, drawing the alien's attention.
The alien pursues him inside, and the massive ceramo carbide door slams shut.
They win. The cost in human life is horrific, but the technology of the door holds. The alien is trapped.
But this is where the text delivers its most devastating critique of systems.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can build the strongest firewall in the world, but it means absolutely nothing if you give a disgruntled employee admin access.
That is the perfect analogy. They built an indestructible vault to keep a thief out, but they left a hypnotized inside man right next to the combination dial, Golic.
During the chaos, the guards watching Golic in the infirmary abandon their post.
Golic, whose mind has fully integrated the alien into his twisted theology, now views the creature as a divine entity.
A dragon that must be freed, he wanders down to the waste chamber.
Inside, the alien is hurling its mass against the door. The text describes 3 massive, concussive booms echoing down the hall.
The sheer kinetic energy is terrifying, but the ceramo carbide holds. The technology is perfect.
But the human element is flawed. Golic walks up to the control panel. He doesn't need to break the door, he just presses the release button.
The 6-foot-thick steel slides open. He peers into the dark and whispers, "I'm with you all the way, just tell me what to do." And he steps inside.
The sacrifice of Junior, the horrific burns the other inmates suffered, all of it is undone by a single keystroke.
The alien is loose again. And as this realization sets in, Ripley is hit by a wave of debilitating, intense nausea.
It's not the trauma, it's not the adrenaline. She suddenly understands the anomalous behavior of the alien in the infirmary.
She forces Aaron to take her back to the crashed EEV to use its medical neuroscanner.
Aaron operates the machine, scanning her internal cavity. And there, nestled deep beneath her sternum, tapping into her blood supply, is an embryo.
But the text makes it clear this isn't just a drone. It is a queen.
Let's explain the biology of why her body hasn't rejected it.
Parasitic organisms often secrete severe immunosuppressants to prevent the host body from attacking them.
But this organism doesn't just suppress the immune system, it integrates with it. Ripley has become the ultimate incubator.
This explains why the adult alien spared her. Its deepest biological imperative is to protect the royal lineage.
Ripley is walking around with a biological force field, but the cost is her own life.
It is a profound cosmic irony. She has fought this species across decades, lost her daughter, lost her crew, and now her own biology has betrayed her to ensure their survival.
But the narrative doesn't let her dwell on this existential horror, because a more immediate systemic threat arrives.
Aaron intercepts the transmission. A Weyland-Yutani rescue ship is inbound, arriving in a matter of hours.
So what does this all mean? I want the listener to weigh Aaron's perspective versus Ripley's here.
Aaron's reaction here is vital to understand. He is overjoyed. He thinks he is going to get hazard pay.
He thinks he's going to go home, see his wife and child, and finally escape this nightmare.
He represents the ultimate middle management mindset. He implicitly trusts the corporate structure that employs him.
But Ripley possesses the institutional knowledge that Aaron lacks. She knows Weyland-Yutani isn't sending a rescue team.
They are sending a bioweapons retrieval team. They want the adult alien, and more importantly, they want the queen growing inside her.
If the company acquires this organism, they will study it, breed it, and eventually it will reach Earth. At what point does institutional loyalty become a death sentence for humanity?
It's a terrifying question. Ripley begs Aaron to send a false transmission. She wants to broadcast that the entire facility has suffered a toxic leak, hoping the company will abort the mission.
But Aaron refuses to provide the authorization code. He literally cannot bring himself to violate company protocol.
He tells her, "You don't get the code out of me without killing me first."
It is a terrifying display of institutional brainwashing.
Aaron is not a malicious man, but his adherence to the rules has stripped him of his basic survival instincts and moral reasoning.
He would rather risk the extinction of humanity than risk a reprimand from his corporate superiors. It's infuriating.
Ripley realizes she cannot deprogram a lifetime of corporate loyalty in 10 minutes.
She knows the Weyland-Yutani ship is coming, and they will want the adult alien alive to harvest. So she makes the only tactical choice left.
She leverages her own doomed biology. Knowing the adult alien will not harm the queen she carries, she grabs a flashlight and a heavy piece of metal pipe.
And she walks alone into the subterranean darkness of the air ducts. She goes to hunt the beast, to force a final confrontation before the corporation can arrive.
It is a bleak, powerful conclusion to our deep dive.
We've seen how cold mechanical logic, Rigid prison bureaucracy and naive corporate trust all create the perfect breeding ground for a primal predator.
What the text forces us to confront is that the Xenomorph did not dismantle Fiorina 361 on its own. The aliens simply exploited the cracks in the systems the humans built.
The cold logic of the Sulaco, the genetic prejudice of the prison colony, the bureaucratic normalcy bias of Superintendent Andrews.
And the blind corporate loyalty of Aaron. These human flaws were the true architects of the massacre.
And I want to leave you with a chilling thought that builds on the very last pages of the source material.
Imagine the future that Weyland-Yutani is actively trying to build. Fast forward to a timeline where corporate scientists men with names like Getamin and Wren finally acquire the organism.
In that future, a human host is no longer viewed as a tragic victim.
No, a person screaming in a medical bed with an alien in their chest isn't a medical emergency. They are simply considered a biological asset.
A necessary incubator for corporate R&D.
The paradigm shifts completely. The monster becomes the product and humanity becomes the raw material.
What happens to our society when our most powerful institutions decide that a weapon of mass destruction is inherently more valuable than the citizens it consumes?
We cease to be people. We become data points in a catastrophic experiment.
Will we eventually engineer our own extinction just to see how the biology works? It is a waking nightmare, a systemic mental malaria where the horror is written right into the company handbook.
And no automated failsafe is coming to wake you up.
Think about that the next time you put your unquestioning faith in a foolproof system. That's all for this deep dive. Stay curious.